So I put out a YouTube community post about a week or so ago, and it turns out most of you agree with me. Skellige is the best designed faction in Gwent. That's a little weird if you, especially if you didn't already realize that. Nilfgaard is the most popular faction in Gwent, but why does everybody like Skellige? Let's dive into that today. Skellige is the master, the absolute master of blurring the lines. Let's go ahead and just look at a couple of quick examples. If I pull up on Crate Raiders, card's great. It's a 4 for 5 that can 4 for 5 deal 2. So it starts out as 6 for 5, but it becomes an 8 for 5 later on, rewarding you for holding it back and or bringing it back from the graveyard later on because of the veteran tag. Now, more importantly here is the pirate and warrior tag. This means if there's a pirate deck, you can run it. It's a fine card. It's an 8 for 5. Also very good as a warrior. If you're running a warrior deck, you're probably running it. You'll see this in different decks. Well, that's really cool. But let's take another card that is an even better example of it, though it doesn't see quite as much play. On Crate Raiders, we'll see play if a warrior deck ever becomes competitive, which historically, warrior decks have done quite well. Let's look at Artist real quick. This really blurs the line between cultist, druid, and self-damage. While Artist has this incredible ability whenever a unit's played, damage it by half its power. That means if I play a unit that wants to be damaged, Artist got me covered while my opponent has to struggle with this ability. Also, it lets me thin my deck at a cultist out. Well, that's fantastic. Kind of plays in that self-damage theme. But it's also a druid. You know what druid's like? Alchemy. Look at this, right? So if I run a druid, like a Crocran Preacher and Getty, start setting everything up, get down Getty, trigger it one time on a second Croclan Preacher, then finish it off Artist, and then just transition to an alchemy gameplay. Great. I don't actually have to deal with Artist's downside. All of a sudden, all my opponent's stuff, all their units are coming at half power, and I get my full value out of my cards because I'm just going to run alchemy. That's pretty cool. All of a sudden, if you start looking at all the cards, this is just the case time and time again. Hey, look, Axel 3 Eyes really likes beasts, but it's also a druid. So maybe you should run an alchemy that spawn a lot of beasts. That seems interesting, but you could also shove it in something like Savage Bear Spawn deck with Megascopes. Okay, that seems a little cheesy, but does hold true. Hey, Havfru Singer just came out. You can heal a damaged unit while it's a cultist druid, but it also works really, really well with good old Bear Witcher Adepts, which damage itself by 4, but heals itself naturally every turn, triggering a spawn from the Singer of the 2-point, what are they called? Sirens? Yeah, 2-point Sirens. That's really interesting. Should you try to mix and match Witchers now all of a sudden with the Singers? Skellige gets the best design and is just, it's so good. It's so good. Simply because everything blurs the line. Bear Witchers, hey, they damage themselves by 3 when they come to play. What if you had a creative way to heal them beyond just Kadach? They only can heal up to 7 now. Hey, we should use a Havfru Singer, or should you look at the leader abilities? Battle Trance will automatically heal random units by 1 if you play an alchemy. Well, Bear Witchers get great value as 8 for 5s when you play them, and they're damaged. Heal them with the alchemy cards here. But is that really the best choice? That, Bear Witchers, they deal damage. What about Reckless Flurry? Make sure you can finish off whatever you're dealing damage to, or Onslaught. This is where the other part of Skellige shines, which is its leader abilities blur. A great example, when the new expansion hit, Price of Power, was Little Havfru, my girl. Little Havfru, check this out. 6 for 4, damages itself and spawns Rain. That's awesome. What leader ability should you run it with? Well, you got like a couple, right? Well, Rain, you're dealing damage stuff. Maybe you can finish him off with Reckless Flurry. Hey, you're hurting yourself automatically, so might as well heal you back up with a bit of Battle Trancing. But also, it's weather related. Hey, if I run it with something like Rage of the Sea, I can double down on all those awesome weather effects. Huh? What should you pick? I don't know. It depends on how you build the deck, but that's the beauty of Skellige. The lines are blurred, they're gray, they're murky, and they're wonderful. The decks are complex and hard to build, and it's really, really fun. I cannot talk about this faction the most, enough. It's so good. And if there's any faction that's going to come out of left field of some kind of weird meta breaker, it's going to be Skellige. Nilfgaard will always have a deck appear, because Nilfgaard has enough control tools that no matter what meta it is, they'll find their way to grab, even if you nerf every one of their cards, you'll see all of a sudden out of the grave, Nilfgaard will rise up and just crawl its way out like some kind of lock-oriented zombie. That's Nilfgaard. But Skellige is the one that comes out of left field with really cool meta breakers and almost always seems to find a way to make it in the meta. Because of its cards of cool interactions, it's hard to figure out based on the meta what's going to really come up. I love it. It's fantastic. It's a 10 out of 10. Fantastic. But let's go a little bit further. Do I think CDPR is learning from this, right? Do I think CDPR knows that Skellige is the best? Well, I already looked at Artis, right? I mentioned it earlier, and he was just reworked to be in an even cooler form. But it's Skellige. It doesn't really count, right, John? What about the recent Price of Power expansion, John? Does CDPR know? Well, as I apparently talked to myself in the third person, giving you guys all a voice, but which is really giving me a voice, which is a little weird. We're not going to worry about it. Sure, it's fine. So is CDPR learning from this? And my answer is yes. Yeah, kinda. There are a couple cards that stand out to me as really good, but a lot of them aren't. I think Bountiful Harvest is one of the best designed cards there is, and especially for a non-Skellige card. It might be the best designed card in this whole expansion, just low-key. Nature, Elves, Hand Boost, all in one card. It's unbelievable how much value you can put in this tiny card, right? You want to run a Force Protector, you can run an Elf-oriented deck, you run a Hand Buff, you run a Hand Buff, you might be picking worse Elves, but you get to organize your buffing so it can hit Torque for extra boost. It's so fascinating. This card's like a 10 out of 10. Brilliant design. Brilliant. The other one, also in the last leg of the Price of Power. Is that what the Price of Power expansion? Yep, the last little leg was Rafard's Vengeance. Coming in as a Siege Engine Mage. That is the sickest thing. I love this. When I look at this image, first, I just want to think this image is the sickest thing ever. It's a mage using a catapult to manipulate the angle. It's the sickest thing. I love it. I love it. And it's a mage machine siege engine, letting you merge mages alongside things like siege, but also letting you maybe sneaking in the a blue stripe commando deck so you can get extra 1 or 2 casts. It's just a cool card. It merges a lot of archetypes together. It's fantastic. But there's not much else here, really. Like, a lot of the other stuff is pretty linear in what it does. Either it's ultra flexible, it just kind of slots in everywhere. It doesn't encourage or reward you really for much. Like, Gearheart's just a 13, 4, 11 minimum in any deck. It's really pretty runnable in any deck. Terra Nova, Spying isn't very hard to get now. Between the Turncoats and Mage Torturers, you just can slot it into any deck. Fukusa, any deck. Simless will keep rearing his head time and time again. He's very strong. Slot into any deck. A lot of them are just either too universal or much more niche. Torque, I'm looking at you. Not that it's bad to have a lot of this, but you want to be. I think a lot of the factions can move more towards a Bountiful Harvest, Rafard's Vengeance, more line blurring. So why don't I go ahead and dive in a little bit there? Because I don't really see it in the rest of the set outside of Skellige and those 2 cards. And you might say there's a card here or there, John, that you're missing. But for the most part, I think everything else felt creative or linear, but nothing that was quite that branch. That I have my hands in multiple archetypes, and I encourage you to merge them together, like Skellige does. That creates interesting interactions and neat decks. So I wanted to call out a couple of the factions. Since Scoia'tael and Northern Realms already had a card apiece that I felt was very, very indicative that those factions are moving in a good direction, I didn't feel necessary to call it out. Actually, I wanted to spend my time on monsters, Nilfgaards, and Syndicate. Let's start with Nilfgaard, which I've talked about before. Honestly, Nilfgaard just needs a soldier rework. I've talked about this before. If there's so many great soldiers that have their hand in so many interesting places, they just need a little bit of love. This Nazca's Brigade, if you boost your enemy unit of like a Nilfgaard Knight, or there's more cards that reward you for boosting your opponent's units, this card could be really good. Needs better stats though. You have stuff like Imperium Forces, already a hand in the world of soldiers, and spying. It's just not quite there with the support it needs. Maybe a little bit of stat adjusting, maybe an additional support card or 2 to help merge the archetypes. But I feel like stuff like the fact that Imperium Forces, this is the kind of card you need to blur the archetypes, but it's just not there in the stats yet. You have the Usurper Emperor trying to reward you for agents, and it's a soldier. There are a lot of different cards and soldiers that have already kind of had their foot in both worlds. They just need some love, a tweak to an ability here or there. I've talked about it before. Soldier needs help, maybe a little bit of support. But I think if I was going to say how to really fix Nilfgaard, hit soldiers, and I think that blurring will get better. But Nilfgaard's already been in a good spot. They have a lot of cool creative tools. They always seem to find a way in any meta. I think it gets more complicated for monsters. Monsters for a very long time was the faction that I thought was the best designed. Nilfgaard was very, very good, but I thought monsters low-key did a great job. But now we're starting to get to the part where they kind of cheated. If we go to monsters' leader abilities, it becomes very clear. They being CDPR. They just said, here, you want to run this deck, great, here's your leader ability, here are the cards for it, go. Overwhelming Hungers for Death Wish, Blood Sense for Vampires, Fruits of Yizgif is for something that frequently consumes every turn, Racket Swarms for swarming, or the weird unitless play, that's kind of an accident, but Let's See Warp exists, and Frightener exists, so cool. White Frost, hey look, it's for Wild Hunt. It literally says Wild Hunt right there. Force of Nature is, hey, it's a relic. Oh, Thrive in Relics, sure. And Carabas is for some kind of control style of Cave Troll and Kelly. It's pretty boring. And the easiest fix is going to be to start slotting in cards that blur archetypes. An example of this would be some kind of Death Wish card that's also a vampire. Crazy, right? Like there's Detloff. But go further than this. Go much further than this. Make a card that has a Death Wish related to bleeding or other vampires. Something that will reward you for finding a way to have consume in a vampire deck. Or vampires in a consume-oriented deck. Like, that's what you need. You need stuff that blurs stuff. You could go as far as to say, hey, you know, Monsters actually has a really weird sub-theme that nobody talks about, which is Veil, right? They give it's their benefit for all of their, all transform leaders get the Veil benefit, but also, hey, El Conqueror is Veil oriented. Well, Spirit Tip, Veil. Every Phantom and all those got Veil. You have these Ancient Foglets, these Weather Veils. Hey, could you do something of Veil, explore that archetype a bit, try to find the way to say, oh, maybe we'll add in a card or two that rewards you for having veiled units outside of Wild Hunt. Maybe that are vampires and help you merge the two archetypes. Because this is right now very Wild Hunt oriented and weather. They just need cards that blur, ultimately. I think Vampire Death Wish is a very low-hanging fruit. Start there and figure it out. That's my thoughts for Monsters. It's time to stop making it so linear. And unfortunately, the linearity of it is really continued, right? There are some cool cards here. Yaga's cool, a little weak, but cool. Incubus is cool, but a lot of stuff, Witch's Staff is wild, but that's like a card that defines an archetype into itself. But a lot of this is just relic, put it in everything. Relic, put it in a really aggressive control deck. Relic stuff, very linear. They're adding in a new archetype, but right now what Monsters needs is cards that really blur the line. And last but not least, talked about it before, I'll mention it again, Syndicate, good old Syndicate, is honestly just a mess. I don't think you can ever think about blurring the lines when the lines are so blurred already that there's not distinct archetypes. You gotta do the opposite problem than Monsters. Whereas Monsters is too spread out, Syndicates is literally just a bleh pile in the middle. Now CDPR seems to be aware of this. We go over to the price of power, especially the ladder cards. Cards like Purge say, Witch Hunters. More Witch Hunters you have on the field, better it is. Great. That rewards you for playing Witch Hunters. But and I've talked about it before, Syndicate needs reworks to add in this effect over and over and over. More than just Witch Hunters, you need more payoffs for specific things in high payoffs. If you have 7 Witch Hunters out, this thing is a beating. That's good. Give more cards like this to Syndicate. And that is my thoughts. Skellige is the best because it found that sweet spot to find an interesting archetypes that also blur well together. Syndicate's a jumbled mess. Nilfgaard just needs some soldier reworks to help kind of bridge it between different ideas. Monsters is too linear. Finally, at that point, it's time to blur the lines a little bit. And Scoia'tael and Northern Realms are already going in a good direction. We can see the little like tricklings of light from above breaking through the clouds, letting me know that CDPR has good intentions for those factions. Those are my thoughts. Let me know down below if you agree with me, if you disagree, if you think I'm missing cards, some price of power that should be calling out that indicates that CDPR knows what they're doing. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe you say John Skellige is the worst faction. It's the worst design. Let me tell you why. Let me know down below. Love all of you, and I'll see you all soon. Shout out to pseudonym 81, Ahmed Ali, and McRandar for all their generous support on Patreon. Thank you all so much.